So what's your name?
My name is Tim Sully. It's spelled T-I-M-S as in Sam, S-U-L-L-Y, and I'm Development Director at Sienna Francis House.
And can you tell us a little bit about where we are today?
Sure. The Sienna Francis House is the largest provider of services to the homeless in the state of Nebraska and sort of obviously Omaha, Nebraska. We provide emergency shelter, food, clothing, and all the other emergent, anybody has those kind of emergent needs, we provide for those. And so we also have, right behind me is an apartment, so we provide permanent supportive housing, that's a term, to people who were formerly homeless. We also, the third program, residential program we have is an addiction recovery, treatment and recovery program. Aptly named our Miracles program. And so on our campus here, we have those three housing programs. Our ultimate goal is to help people become housed, especially for those that are not in the apartments already. That's our goal. So whether it's in the emergency shelter or in the addiction recovery program, we want people to get out, be self-sufficient, be housed, obviously. And that's their goal. So we have case managers here who work hand in hand with our shelter staff to help people acquire the services they need to ultimately get housed. And so, yeah, that's how it. So the emergent services and the case management services really are one and the same. With the, we provide for the, we help people get stabilized, and then we help people get out of here.
And how does the permanent housing program work? Do you accept housing vouchers, or is it separate from a housing voucher program?
Sure. We accept, these apartments are efficiency units, so they're pretty austere. It's one room that has a bed, a built-in writing desk, a very small kitchen, it's a kitchenette, I suppose. It has a dorm fridge and a microwave. And then it has a bathroom that has a door to it. So that's pretty much the room. And the cost is $250 a month rent, which is about as good as you're going to get anywhere. And so we take some people, it's the people who are eligible to be in these apartments are people who they have to fit two criteria. One is they have to have been homeless chronically, and they have to have a disability that was a variable in their homelessness. So those two things have to be true because of some funding mechanisms, some federal funding mechanisms that were part of the original construction. And so that was our agreement. And so quite a number of the people who are in these apartments, they have a disability and they're on Social Security disability. So a percentage of their disability income goes towards housing. And so for a portion of the people, they're able to afford the $250 or right at there. And then some who receive the disability income, their payment does not allow them to get to the $250 mark. So we don't worry about that. And so we basically subsidize that through our organization. So that's not a factor in whether or not someone can stay here. So regarding vouchers, yeah, there's people who have other sources of income. You can call them vouchers. You can call them grants from private foundations or organizations. And so we take any income that people have or are able to achieve, and that's how it works. But ultimately being able to pay the full $250 is not a determining factor on whether or not someone can be here.
And can you elaborate more on that first criteria, chronically homelessness?
Sure. Well, they have to have been. So people have to have been homeless to be eligible, and I don't want to go too much into the weeds, but there's permanent supportive housing is a federal term, and there are organizations across the country that provide permanent supportive housing, including in Omaha. There were 5 organizations, including ours, that provides that. Here in Omaha, there's something called a by name list that all people who are eligible, that are mostly in shelters, as they come up on this by name list, as they rise to the top. And a lot of the reason that people would rise to the top would be because of chronic homelessness. So the most vulnerable of the homeless rise to the top of that list. So this local organization that maintains the list tells us who's next on the list. And so and for those, they have to have been homeless. And for us, for our permanent supportive housing, they have to have a disability that was a variable in their homelessness. Other organizations that provide permanent supportive housing don't necessarily have that second one, which is the disability, but ours is. And so as we are the folks in town who maintain that list know what our two criteria are, and so they would only send us people who fit both of those criteria. So the criteria for sure for all permanent supportive is homeless. And again, the most vulnerable people are those that are probably most chronically homeless. That's how that works.
And what would you do if, let's say someone didn't have a diagnosis or a way to quantify that second criteria?
Yeah, so they have to have so we have 48 units of permanent supportive housing, and so we have to have on file both those documentation of homelessness, which is easy to get, and then the second one, which you're asking about, the diagnosis of a disability, has to be present from a reputable person. And so that's, how does the person get that? Well, they can see a psychiatrist, or they can have the disability can be a mental illness, it could be a medical, they can be in a wheelchair, they can, the disability is defined federally, and so at some point someone needs to have, if they are interested in these apartments, has to ensure that they acquire that. And so, we can direct people, I suppose, to a source, but that's about as good as we can do. And so if people are interested in this, in one of these, they have to fit those two criteria.
And how does one get the fact that they were homelessness put on the record?
Any homeless services provider, including Siena Francis House, can provide we have a form that's called documentation of homelessness. And so we have records of who is homeless, because we do receive some federal funding, we are required to maintain records of people stay here, or anywhere where any organization that receives federal funding of any sort has to maintain these records. And so that in and of itself, that documentation that's of people who stay, that in and of itself is the documentation that's needed. Having said that, we also have a form that says yes, if someone asks or requests the documentation of homelessness, we can provide that just as a paper form. But the local organization, it's kind of an umbrella organization that maintains the by name list. They have access to the same information, so they can verify that easily through the shared community database of homeless people who are experiencing homelessness.
And what would you say are some of the most important factors for rehabilitation?
Well, I will say that generally speaking, people's perception of why people are homeless, there's oftentimes some stereotypical ones, and whatever stereotype you have, I would just say, whatever you think, it's probably more complicated than that. So if I sometimes will be invited to like a local service organization, and so at some point someone will say, well, those homeless, they just need to get a job, and that'll take care of it. And so, I would say it's probably more complicated than that. And so sometimes I'll say, we're a low barrier shelter. I think it's fireworks time. So we're a low barrier shelter, and so we serve anyone who comes to us without question, and we don't have don't have to meet a certain standard. And so subsequently, we get people who may may suffer from chronic addiction. They may suffer from even a profound mental illness or both, and we happily serve those people. And so for the guys who say, well, they just need to get a job, sometimes I will say, if you're starting a business and you want to hire people, I would say, and sometimes I'll say, depending on how I feel, I'll say, well, you may not want to start with some of the people that we serve, because they're so mentally ill or developmentally disabled or both, that they may not be the right person for you, and they would have a difficult time maintaining a job. And so, often it's the case that there's another compounding factor that we don't know about. It could be a medical calamity happens. There's a job loss. And so there's all kinds of factors that go into why people become homeless. But generally speaking, it's more complicated than you think. And I've listened to hundreds of stories of people who fall into homelessness, and by and large, it's a tragic. Often it's a tragic life prior to turning 19 or 18 or 19, age of majority, and it's really, I only have empathy for the people who end up homeless, because I know them and I've listened to their stories, and for people who think that they should just get a job, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, get a job, I would say a lot of those people have never met someone like the people that we serve. So, yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to add or talk about?
I don't think so. It's good.